Maul and Kenobi. Thanks to the Clone Wars animated series, I dare say this has become the greatest rivalry in all of Star Wars, and one that is likely to conclude with the episode of Rebels called Twin Suns. And though I think Maul's story is finally about to come to an end, is Obi-Wan's on the other hand about to be explored further, with this episode being only the beginning of more Kenobi to come in the future. Will he be getting his own anthology movie, with an announcement coming possibly as soon as next month's Star Wars Celebration? And if so, is this all a good idea? Or should Obi-Wan just be left alone on Tatooine to watch Luke? Are they treading a bit too much on sacred ground if they do too much with Obi-Wan during this time between episode 3 and 4? Because I don't know about you, but I always got that sense that that crazy old wizard we met in episode 4 named Ben hadn't gotten out too much. First of all, let me say I'm completely okay with Maul hunting down Obi-Wan on Tatooine to confront him again, as I'm sure most people are. This could end up being the best episode of Rebels yet. Sure, the argument could certainly be made that Maul should have never been brought back during the Clone Wars in the first place, not because it hasn't made for some interesting and good stories, but because Maul surviving being cut in half and then falling down a hole is a bit much, and opens up the door for others who we know to be dead to also come back. Now, no matter how I or you may feel about Maul being brought back in the first place, the simple fact of the matter is he has been brought back, and I think the only fitting way for him to again go out is by Obi-Wan's hand. Not to mention, Obi-Wan deserves to get full credit back for killing Maul. I just wonder if, when he defeats him again, if Obi-Wan will cut him up and take his parts to the four corners of the galaxy to make sure he doesn't come back again. Maybe that'll even be what the Obi-Wan anthology movie is about. And yes, I'm joking. Now, what I find even more curious about this episode of Rebels, because we know how Maul vs. Kenobi has to end more or less, though it should be awesome to see, is it looks like Ezra is also on Tatooine, with Chopper but not Kanan, looking for Obi-Wan, which means these two will likely meet and have some type of conversation, and I'd love to hear what they say to each other. And I suppose there is a chance Ezra will be the one who actually kills Maul, though I would be a little disappointed if that does come to pass. However, if it does, I think the best way I could see that happening is if Maul gets the best of an out-of-practice Obi-Wan and perhaps gives him a good solid force push into a rock and seemingly cripples Obi-Wan. This would go a long way in explaining why, if I'm right, this battle between Maul and Obi-Wan will be a fast-paced one, but 2 years later in the timeline, Obi-Wan has a very slow and methodical fight with Vader in A New Hope because he never fully recovered from his injuries against Maul. Vader, on the other hand, is simply too worried that Obi-Wan is somehow playing possum to go full out on him. Now, getting back to Ezra defeating Maul, which again I could see happening, the only ways I could find this truly believable is if, as I suggest, Maul has crippled Obi-Wan, and yet again he decides to play around with his victim before finishing him off, just like he did in Episode 1, and starts telling him about how long he's waited to do this, or maybe even brings up how he killed Satine, at which point Ezra could just stab him through the back, which yes would be a lame final ending for Maul, or Ezra could challenge Maul, but realizes the only way to defeat him is to tap into the dark side, and does so. The real interesting part is the conversation that would ensue between Obi-Wan and Ezra after, especially if Ezra does somehow tap into the dark side to defeat Maul. We know that Ezra can't call him Obi-Wan because that is a name he's not heard in a long time, according to Episode 4. But to avoid that problem, Ezra could just call him Master Kenobi. Oh, and as far as Maul, he's always just called him Kenobi anyway. The real possibility for fun here, and I doubt they do this but who knows, but this episode of Rebels could maybe even be a bit of a prequel to the Kenobi anthology movie, meaning that his interaction with Ezra is what spurs him to leave the planet for some reason and have an adventure. Now that all seems unlikely for multiple reasons. First, people who don't watch Rebels might feel they're missing out on something, but I'd argue it'd be no different than the way the book Catalyst was a prequel to Rogue One. It gives a little backstory, but is an essential viewing or reading to understand the movie. The other real problem with this, however, is I just don't think Obi-Wan has ever left Tatooine in those 19 years for any reason, and if he has, it better be for a damn good one, which I suppose Ezra could offer him. Perhaps this will even link up to that scene in Rogue One between Bail Organa and Mon Mothma when they talk about the Jedi that Bail knows. How so? Well, perhaps Obi-Wan in his anthology movie will, thanks to his meeting with Ezra, get into contact with Bail Organa and let him know he's still alive and would be willing to offer his support to the rebellion or help in any way he could. That Luke is now old enough to more or less take care of himself, and he feels he's wasting away on Tatooine while the galaxy continues to go to hell. And perhaps Bail will have some type of mission for him, so when Mon and Bail talk in Rogue One, it's because they've already had a bit of experience dealing with Obi-Wan. Or another possibility is Obi-Wan may tell Bail that he'd even be willing to train Leia and tell her the truth about who she really is, though who knows if that truth would come from a certain point of view or not. This might explain why Bail sends Leia to him in Rogue One in the first place, because he's recently had contact with Obi-Wan, that he hasn't confirmed that he's still alive and out there, and perhaps he even feels his daughter could be most useful to the rebellion if she becomes a Jedi. Or, of course, you could leave off the Leia training part, and he just trusts her to bring Obi-Wan to Alderaan. Either way, it could go a long way in explaining how Bail Organa knew Obi-Wan would still be on Tatooine after 19 or so years, and even how Leia was supposed to find him on the planet once she got there, because it's not like she could just look him up or ask around for him. It's also curious to note that Obi-Wan didn't know Leia was coming for him, so it doesn't seem like Bail could just easily get into contact with him, probably because Obi-Wan has no means of communication on Tatooine. Another thing to keep in mind to support this is R2 seemed to know where he was going in A New Hope after they crashed on Tatooine, indicating again that Leia knew where Obi-Wan was to be found and told R2, but had no way to just contact him. Another much simpler explanation to how Bail knew Obi-Wan was still on Tatooine is just having Obi-Wan tell Ezra to give a message to Bail Organa that he is still here waiting for the right time, and of course where he can be found exactly when that time finally comes. Ezra may plead with him for help, that the time has come now, and that he was shown in a vision that the answer to defeat the Sith was here on Tatooine, but that just might encourage Obi-Wan more than ever to stay put, having it confirm just how important watching Luke is. Who knows for sure, but having Ezra and Obi-Wan meet does open up the door for a lot of possibilities to either tie back to Rogue One, or to even give a reason for Obi-Wan to leave Tatooine for a time, which we might see in an anthology movie. I'll finish by saying this. I am all for Lucasfilm making an Obi-Wan anthology movie, as I think most fans are. Even Ewan McGregor has said in interviews that he'd like to do it, and he thinks there's a story still to be told between episode 3 and 4 about Obi-Wan. The problem is, what kind of story should that be? Something small and personal that never leaves Tatooine and just shows how hard it is for Obi-Wan to stay put in a galaxy that so desperately needs the Jedi back, which is something we've already seen a bit of in the new Marvel Star Wars comic books. Or do you make it a larger scale movie, which most people want and expect out of Star Wars, especially the casual fan or average moviegoer, even if it changes our perception of what Obi-Wan's been up to all that time on Tatooine? Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Should Ezra and Obi-Wan meet? And if so, what do they say to each other? Could it lead to an Obi-Wan anthology movie, or will that eventual movie be about something else entirely? Lastly, is this finally the end of Maul? Let me know what you think about all these questions, and let's talk some Star Wars. Also, please subscribe to my channel and or check out some of my other videos. If you're already a subscriber, then thanks for your continued support. If you want to know when I upload new videos, then hit the notification button or just follow me on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching.